Welcome to The Victory Show.
Hey, Victors, welcome to this episode of The Victory Show. If this is your first time joining us, I'm Cody, best-selling author of 16 books and the creator of Bestseller by Design. I've had the privilege of helping hundreds of business consultants, founders, and entrepreneurs write and publish their own best-selling books. And through that journey, I've discovered a really fascinating pattern. Most businesses really struggle to break past 7 figures per year in revenue. So on this show, I sit down with some of the world's most successful founders, CEOs, leaders, business owners to uncover the strategies they use to scale way past that mark so that you can do the same. So get ready for some deep insights and actionable takeaways that you can implement in your life and business starting now. For my guest today, while some people dabble in entrepreneurship, he was practically born with a deal memo in hand. Tra Pippin has been a serial entrepreneur since the age of 5, and for the last 40 years, he's made a career out of breathing new life into struggling companies. He's successfully turned around nearly 50 companies across 30 different industries, making him a true master of reinvention, strategy, and operational transformation. So whether it's manufacturing, media, tech, service businesses, Tra sees what others miss and turns chaos into cash flow. His story isn't just about business. It's about pattern recognition, fearless action, and a deep love for fixing what others think is broken. So Tra, thank you so much for being here today. I appreciate it.
You're certainly welcome, Travis. It's Trey, by the way, but that's okay.
All right. So my friend's Trey. He spells it E-Y, so you got me.
Yeah, well, my parents couldn't spell. I forgot to
Y. That's pretty funny. All right, so I gotta know, what's the deal with the serial entrepreneurship? How did you get started as an entrepreneur at 5?
Well, I found that I like candy bars and I like reading comic books. So what I did was at 5, I got my radio flyer wagon. Every Saturday morning, I'd go around the neighborhood and I'd collect clothes hangers and pop bottles. Back in the day when you could get 5 cents for a pop bottle, 10 cents for the big ones. So that was my way to satisfy my hunger for candy bars and comic books. And what we had an A&W place right down the street, and I'd get a big one of those big containers of root beer, and I'd go around almost every Saturday for like 2 or 3 years, and the neighbors loved it. They'd collect them all for me, and there's some days I'd make $3, $4, $5, and that back then that was I could buy all kinds of stuff with that, models sometimes, but in the 7-Eleven where I turned in the pop bottles, he'd pay me 50 cents to go clean up the yard and stuff. So
wow.
I did that, and then in college and law school, I painted. I learned how to paint, so I painted houses and apartments, and grew it to we had I had probably 20 people painting for me at one time. So
wow,
we did that, and then didn't like practicing law, so I got into a business that an uncle had that it was called Yow Break and Clutch. I quit practicing law. I was a law clerk for a federal judge for a year. I didn't like that. Practiced with the city attorney's office in Norman. Didn't like that. So
what was it about law that you didn't like? Just too slow?
No, I debated in high school. I debated in college, and so I thought I'm going to be the next F. Lee Bailey or big time trial lawyers. Well, I found out that just doesn't happen. You don't try very many cases. So I tried a few and didn't like that. But an uncle had a small business that was he'd never broken $900,000 in 30 years.
Wow.
It stayed between $700,000 and $900,000 a year. And he brought me down there, and I tripped over something, and it was a clutch, and I didn't know what it was. A clutch for a big truck, and he said, "That's what we do here. That's a clutch." So anyway, he retired, let me have the business, and Anyway, we grew it in 3 years to almost $5 million. That was my first real business that I had. At that point in time, I got a lot of extra help from family members that was not necessarily wanted, but they saw that it was actually a viable business, and I decided I'd move on, and I had a chance to buy for me at the time, a large company. They were doing $2.5 million a month.
Yeah, that's
in,
pretty good.
in 1982. Yeah, that was a big company. I learned how to finance also.
And you bought that. You found the company and said, I'm going to buy that.
Well, they actually were buying products from me. I had gone out and sold them as a customer, and I found out that they were retiring,
Oh,
and convinced them to sell me the company. And I was able to raise $10 million to buy the company. They financed five of it, and I found five at banks. Well,
wow.
what happened was, this is how I got into the turnaround business. It was an oil and gas business that rigged up trucks, heavy duty trucks and equipment stuff for Halliburton, Dowell, Schlumberger, people like that, and
Those small companies.
small companies. Yeah, and so anyway, and that was in 1982. That we bought it in August of '82. Business was great. Uh, we did 2.7 million that month, and Penn Square Bank closed. You probably don't even know about
Nope.
that. A shopping center bank here in Oklahoma City, but the guy that was doing all the loans, he out of that bank they did, I don't know, $30 billion worth of loans, and
Wow.
he was giving money to everybody. Anybody that wanted it, get $5 million, no problem. So anyway, they FDIC closed it down, and it snowballed into a bank that we borrowed from. They closed them next. So anyway, in the meantime, all of our $30 million backlog was canceled by Halliburton, Dowell, Schlumberger, the Western Company, whatever. So
Was
this
that all a result of the banking stuff or just economy
all,
stuff?
yeah, well, they didn't need our equipment. We had, you know, like I want to say like $5 million worth of heavy duty truck winches, like 100-ton winches and things like that. So anyway, what I had to do to save the company was I went around to Halliburton, Dowell, Schlumberger, all those big companies, and said, you've canceled all these orders. We're out of business if you can't do something with me. So I begged, I pleaded, I got down on my knees, and every one of them, and Halliburton was the best. They not only renewed their business, but they actually increased some of it. But
Wow.
they said, we're going to pay you over 3 years. We're going to take that stuff that was, they wanted it immediately. And now all of a sudden they gave us 3 years. So it saved the company. But in the meantime, a year later, our business had gone from 2.5 million down to 300,000
A month.
a month. So we went from 130 employees there to about 32 were left.
Wow. Ouch.
Ouch. But in the meantime, the business started rolling back in. And I think when I sold the company in '88, we were doing almost $9 or $10 million again. So, and it now is a $50 million company. They're
Wow.
still around. They're a great company. But that was the start. I had to go to lender after lender after lender to replace, the $5 million line that we had. And we found an asset-based lender. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was Wells Fargo. They financed us and basically saved us. But it was very tough sledding. But that got me into the turnaround business back before turnarounds were a thing. But we were able to save the company, and it was a great company. It didn't need to be closed. But that's what we did. That's how I started.
So was your family a little shocked when you spent all the time going to law school and then you came out for a couple of years and then said, and got into, at the time business, but for them, they're like, you went from being an attorney to working on clutches.
Well, yeah, yeah. Well, my dad was a dentist here in Oklahoma City, so he didn't know anything about business. He was not a good business. He was a great dentist, but not a good businessman. But he didn't care what I did. For him, it was, oh,
Oh,
you're
you
doing
got a
what
paycheck.
are you doing now? So,
Oh, that's
like,
funny.
uh,
So how do you leverage buying one business, turning it around, selling it? Like, did you then purposely start looking for distressed businesses, or did it just they start finding you?
uh, pretty much they found me. People knew that I had done that. And my next major venture was a company called Jetta Corporation here in Oklahoma City. They manufactured bathtubs and solid surface, and they were losing about $1 million a year. They were comparable in size to Perfection Equipment Company, but my next door neighbor had been trying to buy them. They were for sale. The bank was all over them. And anyway, I put together a group to help buy that company and save it. And at the same time, a major remanufacturer here in Oklahoma City was closing down. And
Hmm.
so I was able to hire all of their key people, their plant manager, their chief engineer, their quality control person, people that needed to be hired at Jetta. And we went from a 30% defect rate when we bought it to about 3 sigma. So, I mean, we went down to
Wow.
less than 1% defect and
Jeez.
turned it around. In 90 days, we were profitable. And um, we closed down a lot of we shut down the solid surface piece of the business. It was like Corian.
Yeah.
And we were able to grow that business tremendously. And we recently sold that 2 years ago for eight figures.
Wow.
So
So you had that one a while then.
I had that one a while, yes. And other companies found me in the meantime. I found a pipe yard, an oil field pipe reclamation yard in El Reno. The bank had, and another turnaround guy here in town had it in bankruptcy, and I went out and looked at it and was told not to buy it by all the people in the industry, and wasn't smart enough to listen to him. But we bought it, and it's still around. We still own that, and it's. I mean, we're making, I don't know, 20 to 30% EBITDA on that, so it's doing great. But it was a major turnaround for us.
So you've done this enough times now. Are there like patterns that like first off, like what are the patterns that get these businesses into trouble? Let's talk about that.
I'd say 80 to 90% of the companies that I look at have management is uh, almost always the problem.
Hmm.
They create it, they don't know how to get out of it. A lot of the companies have been family owned, and they've got second, third generation people in there that they're used to daddy buying me a car. And paying for all my trips and, Dad, I want to use the boat this week and, that kind of stuff. And so I go in and I cut that out. And if they don't like it, the bank's usually behind me because the bank has brought me in there. And so I get rid of all the perks, and most of the family members go. And
Hmm.
typically we provide all new management in these companies, and it works pretty well. I've done it through. I've got a kind of a way I do it. I call it the 6 Ps, and I taught marketing at University of Oklahoma for 8 years, and entrepreneurship at Oklahoma City University for about 10 years.
Nice.
So marketing and sales I've done. I feel like I'm pretty capable of doing that. So
Well, let's talk about that too, right? Because there's obviously sort of the theoretical, like book smart college level marketing, but how did you blend sort of the real world, boots on the ground reality with what was also being taught?
When I go into when I went into companies, I looked at the 6 P's, and the 4 P's is what you learn in marketing in college. 4 P's are product, price, place, promotion, and I've added 2 more P's to that, and it's people and passion.
Mm,
So I look at the product. Are they producing a product that needs to be produced, or a service that needs to be provided? Place, are they selling at the right place? Do they have the right customer base? Promotion, what's their marketing like? A lot of it's old school. Some of them have tried the new, Instagram, that kind of stuff. Social media is working for them. We don't change it. If not, we'll bring in,
shut it down.
the search engine optimization for almost all these companies was probably averaged on the 30th page of Google. So, nobody's finding them. They're not doing any Google ads, any of that. So we changed that. And, uh, the people, I do a deep dive on all the people. I'll spend, I find out who's there, who's good. And if they're good, I will really utilize them. I'll leverage them. And if they have passion for the business, which I call P squared, you got a person with passion for the industry, like we had a printing company in Houston that we had a plant manager that was so passionate about what he was doing. And it was, I mean, the management there was awful. I
Yeah.
mean, we took it over when that GE Capital owned the company or loan, and the management was third generation. The guy never showed up for work and that kind of stuff. So we took it over.
Shocking.
Yeah, shocking. We took it over,
And
and
then and then was he shocked when he was replaced?
yeah, it was kind of weird. I went into his office the first day, and he wouldn't let me go into his bathroom. So that night I snuck in, and he had a weird deal. He had candles. He had pictures of his dad who started the company all over the bathroom, and
It's like a
it
little
was weird.
shrine.
Little shrine, yeah. And so,
I shouldn't laugh, but I mean,
it was
you can't
funny.
make this
It was,
stuff up, right?
you can't make that up. But anyway, that's typical of the situation. We had another furniture company that we took over that walked in, and the owner, his wife, his 3 kids were all on salary, and not small salaries. They all had either Porsche Panameras or G wagons, whatever. So we took all that away.
And the company was paying for it.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Okay.
Plus salaries on that. On top of that, the kids weren't. I mean, even out of high school, they were making $30,000 a year. So
Wow.
we fixed that, and sold that company. But that's
It's
that.
like it's fascinating to me, right? So you have these family-owned companies that are in trouble, and they're on the verge of bankruptcy or in bankruptcy, and then when you come in and you restructure everything, and then they get shocked by it, and it's like, well, we could
What
do
happened?
this, or in like 2 months you don't get anything, right? That's the other thing that was always fascinating to me is that the rationale behind some of that stuff. Has there been an industry that has been like the most challenging industry for you to come in and execute a turnaround? Or is business, regardless of what you're in?
Well, one thing that I've told every banker that I've ever met is that I can run any company out there. Maybe not as well as some, but if you apply business basics to any company, I think I can. I think I could run any company in America. Maybe not as well as some people, but I could get it. I could turn it around. I could fix it and make it profitable. And then bring in major CEOs, CFOs, whatever, to take it from there. But I feel like I can fix any company with those basics.
Hmm.
I mean, I've got a pretty good financial background anyway, so we run the 13-week rolling forecasts, and we do all the numbers and stuff. But bankers make sure that you're doing that. Uh, you know, they want to make sure you got coverage ratio on sales, and make sure the cash flow is there to cover everything you're trying to do. But
So let's talk about that then a little bit. So, a lot of the people I'm working with are kind of in the 500,000 to 1 million. They're trying to scale. Some of them want to get to 3, 5 million a year. What, and from my experience talking to them, a lot of them are pretty clueless on the actual numbers of their business, right? And usually it's because you get somebody like me, passionate about something, hangs out a shingle, thinking if I can do 100,000 a year, I'm good. And suddenly they're at 500,000 a year, going like, oh, I could be a lot bigger. Right. So they have a talent at coaching, maybe not necessarily running a business. So what are maybe 3 or 4 things that someone in that position, like what are the skills they need to develop to be able to successfully lead that company to hit the, a 3, 5, $10 million run rate?
I think that one of the things that most of these small business guys that I see, and I have been in groups like Vistage before, and Tab, and
Mm.
things like that are great for small businesses. They're really good because you get around uh, small business owners like yourself, like 10 or so. I'd recommend like Vistage to anybody. I was a uh, facilitator for those companies, and they're great because you get 10 or 12 people that are like-minded and they want to grow that.
So
But
explain Vistage for people that may not know what that is.
pardon,
Okay.
Vistage is a group, nationwide group. I think every city in America has a Vistage group, and I don't mean for this to be a Vistage,
Sure.
you know.
Yeah, but I know a lot of people are probably going to be like, what? They haven't heard of it.
Yeah, it's a group that you can Google it, you can check it out, but it's a group of like 20, 25 companies, and sometimes in two groups. But you meet every month, and you have a facilitator that comes to your place. I'd recommend that for any small business. They'll analyze your business. They'll tell you what's going on right, what are you doing right, what are you doing wrong. And so many of these people, like you say, are maybe they're a good salesperson, but they're not a financial person. They don't know that, when they tell the bank everything's great, we're growing at 20% a year, but the banker goes, well, why aren't you profitable? And they really can't answer that.
Yeah.
So
I used to do copywriting and direct marketing, and I worked with companies where the founder of the company was remarkable sales guy, right? Guys that could make it rain money, they're get the businesses up to 7, 8 million a year, and then you go behind the scenes and it's chaos because they didn't have the skill of running a business. But whenever they get into trouble, they'd just be that they will go out and make it rain enough money to get them out of trouble. But behind the scenes, the poor employees were just stressed out of their minds and working crazy hours, and everybody. That was the first time that I had an insight in, because as a young kid, I'm looking at, oh man, this guy's making 8 million a year. He must be a genius business guy. No, he's good with offers and he's good at closing people, but the rest of it, sometimes they were almost successful despite themselves.
yeah, I've seen a lot of that. I One time I had a Russian gentleman that had started in the manufacturing computers back in the day, before you had the really big, anybody could buy it. There was a big monthly magazine that everybody advertised in, and he hired me. He was in Salon, Ohio, right outside Cincinnati, and he said, "Can you grow my company? We're at about $8 million a year, and where do you want to go?" So anyway, we crafted a marketing plan, and I said, "Can you cover this?" This is back in the day when the Pentium 90 was the hot processor and stuff. It was a
Yeah.
company called MicroX, and anyway, I crafted a marketing plan for him, and he said, I'll cover it. But I mean, his margins were slim. And I said, you're going to outgrow this pretty quickly. And so anyway, he said, don't worry about it. I'll get the money
We'll
to do
figure
it.
it out.
We'll figure it out. And so he didn't ask me for operational help, just marketing. So we created a marketing plan, and uh, the next year he hit $105 million in revenue. And
Just a little bit of growth.
3 months later, he was out of business.
Yeah.
I mean, his margins were so slim that he couldn't keep up. He was way behind with everybody. And he said, "What do I do now?" And I said,
Gotta close that.
"Nothing."
Yeah, I'm working with an author right now, and she deals specifically in operations. She's an operations consultant, fractional COO, and her book is titled "How to Grow Yourself Out of Business." And it was
Yeah.
exactly that. She's like, everybody thinks scale, 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 and then people don't address the. She's like, there's new challenges at every benchmark you go along, and she's like, you can scale yourself right out of a really fantastic business if you're not careful. It's just what that guy
But
sounds like he did.
yeah, that's exactly that. That happens a lot when they don't understand. I tried to tell him that, you can't do this. You don't have the capital. Anyway, he wouldn't listen to me, so he
Well,
went out of business.
well, at least you know your marketing was effective.
But yeah, he got him all the business he wanted, which he asked for. So he's,
Yeah. So when you come in then and you're replacing teams, especially management teams, what are some benchmarks of a good manager? Like either CEO or CEO, like what specifically, how do you like when you're hiring, how do you know like, yeah, this guy's got it or like, no, this guy shouldn't be in a management position?
I've been fortunate enough to find a really good group of guys that I can place into almost any company. Like I've got one guy that we've done 3 or 4 turnarounds, and he's now running Mike Sleeper. He's running the pipe yard, and
Wow.
he's an aeronautical engineer by training. But he started out with me at the company in Houston, the printing company, and then we went from there. He went from there to another place, and then he took H&O Sports and ran that. I don't know if you know that company, but out of Redmond, Washington, they invented the slalom back in the 50s.
Oh, yep, yep.
They invented wakeboards and that kind of stuff, but it was a total disaster. That company was. Mike turned it around and fixed all the
It's
issues.
it's so amazing to hear like some of these companies, because so many people I work with, they think, oh, if I can just hit 10 million a year, like, my all my problems will be solved. And yet you have some of these companies that are building globally recognized brands doing 10 or 12 million a year, and yet they're just a disaster. Like as a business owner, especially somebody who's never crossed $1 million a year, right? I think most people look at that and go, man, like how does that even happen? Like how is that even possible? It's hard to comprehend that you could reach that point and then actually be in more trouble than if you're a smaller company.
Well, I think the issue is they don't self-reflect, and they don't plug holes in their management. At some point in time, they may be, like you say, maybe a great salesperson, but operations wise, maybe they're, I don't know, printing or doing other stuff, and they can't they
They don't
they
have the
can't
skill
find
set.
somebody. But there are people out there. I would say that there are people out there that you can find that uh, uh, I can find, or I mean, anybody can find that are very qualified. There are a lot of people out there. Look at your competitors as an example. Find somebody, networking. I found a lot of people just by networking over the years,
Yeah.
in Rotary Club or in the Vistage group or the Tab group. It's I mean, those people are out there. There are a lot of CFOs, as an example. There are a lot of small companies that don't understand the financial end of it. There are a lot of CFO people out there that do it just on for hire. Uh, And I mean, there are a ton of those operational.
So like a small company that's in the $500,000 to $1 million, they could hire a CFO and say, hey, I want to hire you to come in and rip apart my business and show me everything that's wrong with it and how to rebuild it. And that's like just instead of bringing them on as an employee, they're like more of like a CFO consultant.
Exactly. Yeah, they can tell you that, where your problems are. They can typically tell you that you've got an inventory issue. You've got, the industry. What does the industry do? Like if you're manufacturing, what's the average? And there are numbers out there that you can find. What is your industry average as far as gross margins? And if you're like a 30% gross margin and the industry is at 50, you're doing something wrong.
Interesting. So do you have any advice that you give, like with companies you take over? Do you usually try to like work with the existing management structure, or do you take a little bit and watch and determine it? Like, so have you ever gone in and go, okay, these guys are good enough, and then like what advice do you give those guys to help them sort of get out of their own way?
Yeah, it depends on the situation, but no two companies have ever been the same. That's the problem. The problems are similar. I mean, they don't know how to manage their cash flow. Some companies, they start making a little money, they don't realize that they've got to put that money back in to the company to help it grow.
No, I got to put that back into my Porsche.
Yeah, exactly. My wife's lifestyle needs to be, I need to, fix her up and, take care of her and everything else. And all of a sudden, she doesn't realize that, we're growing so fast. We're going broke because we're taking so much money out. And that's an issue. That's a big issue with a lot of these smaller companies.
So interesting. So if somebody's listening to reading this chapter in the book, listening to this episode, they like what they're doing. How does someone get in contact with you, maybe to either hire you to come in for some consulting, or like maybe to be involved in some of the companies you've got running? How do we find you?
T Pippin at infinitesg.com is one. My phone number is 405-834-6336. And I've given my phone number to every company employee that I've ever worked for, and I still get calls occasionally from people that I worked with 20 years ago.
Just checking in, telling you where they're at.
Yeah, a lot of success stories. They tell me, they'll call me up and say, thanks. We reached $10 million this year, and I've got several of those companies, so I'm really proud of those.
I was going to say, it's interesting when you focus on people and try to help nurture people's passions, what will come out of that, especially over the long term. And I think in a lot of businesses that sometimes gets lost.
It does.
All right, Trey, this has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for your time. I've enjoyed chatting.
Well, thank you, Travis. I appreciate it.
All right, take care.
I hope I've helped you some.
This has been fantastic. I've loved it.
Well, anything else I can do, I'll be happy to help you or anybody else out there too. So.